Can you guys hear me?
All right, at 6 o'clock, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call. We'd like to excuse Director Carey. He is traveling for business. Director Butler is online. He's also traveling tonight. Director Ledoux, Director Aid, and Director Leach. So
I believe Director Carey wanted a motion to accept his absence.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. So I'd like to make a motion that we excuse Director Carey from the meeting tonight.
I will second that.
The motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Right. Next, that was fast. So now we're on to 2A, the threat assessment presentation, and we have Aaron Wood from the ESD 189.
I'd like to introduce Aaron. Aaron came and presented to our admin team in August on threat assessment. And I know that as a board, you would ask for a little bit more information. And I said, well, let's hear directly from our trainer. And so I asked Aaron to come down and spend 15, 20 minutes with us. And so welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
coming.
And please help me kind of technologically make sure that I can be heard by everyone here. But first and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. As we all know, kind of working in student threat assessment and working to assess, risk and safety in our students, it takes a village. And so it's always so cool for me to be able to meet more members of the village. So I really appreciate your time and attention to this material. I really just want to give you an overview of what the student threat assessment process looks like in our region. And if you have any questions, at the end, please, I'm very interruptible. So please let me know what questions come up for you. And while you're kind of, okay, I think, are you about set with that? Okay, awesome. Is anyone familiar with student threat assessment at this point?
A little bit, yeah. I've read the policies and a little bit of information.
Okay, great, cool. Well, let's see if we can make this.
Oh, it's not working.
That's okay, yeah, it's really nice.
Yeah, might be complete.
What I'd like to share, as we all know, when we're working with kids, all behavior is communication of some sort of an unmet need, right? And so when we see behavior, that really is just the tip of the iceberg of what is going on below the surface for our young people. And so the very purpose of doing a threat assessment is when we see that behavior or when we hear a threat being made. We have somebody waving outside the window, I don't know. I can see that. So when we have a young person make a threat or bring a weapon to school or something of the like, we know that that's what we see just above the surface. But the nature of a student threat assessment is really, you need to find out what's going on below the surface. What are some of the needs? This is where a lot of what we might uncover in terms of childhood trauma or things going on at home, maybe some undiagnosed mental health needs, that kind of thing. So we really need to sort of identify what is going on for this young person and what are the help and the resources that we can provide for them, so that they don't feel like they need to make threatening statements or behaviors of that kind. So student threat assessments really help us to have. When a young person makes a threat of violence or brings a weapon to school, you really need to have an organized way of addressing that issue. Having a student threat assessment process is not only legally mandated. We know that HB 1216 was passed at the end of 2019, And that mandated that all of our school districts have a threat assessment process and procedure in place by the end of the 2020-2021 school year. Of course, there was a lot of pandemic and some chaos happening then, but all of our school districts have succeeded in that. And so now we all have a threat assessment process in place. Having that process in place really helps a community to address those threat behaviors, those threats that come up. We all know, especially given the nature of social media, that when a threat is made, that information gets out really, really quickly, right? Whether or not that threat was actually made on social media, but we know that kids talk and that information gets out really quickly. And so what that does is create a lot of sense of unease and fear in a community, and especially a community the size of Granite. You know, that just so many families and people talk, and so that can get out. And so having a student threat assessment process in place allows you as a school team and community members to know the school has a process in place to assess the risk that is posed by this behavior or by these statements. We know that just taking a zero tolerance approach for our students does not work. And what I mean by that is that the threat assessment process is not a disciplinary process, but it does oftentimes go hand in hand with a disciplinary process. So, you know, as we all know, if a student makes a threat, there does need to be some sort of disciplinary action. If they bring a weapon to school, there needs to be some sort of disciplinary action. But really, this process is all about assessing, why did they make that threat? Why did they feel like they needed to bring this weapon to school? What is the risk involved? We know that just putting a student out of school really does not help to address that risk. We know that it will, not having that student in school might create immediate safety. But when we think about it, school is home away from home for all of our kids. This is the building, this is the environment that they are most familiar with. These are the people that they are most familiar with outside of their families. When a young person is feeling like they need to enact some sort of harm or potentially a violent act, we know that it's because they have some sort of a grievance. They have some sort of a fixation on feelings of that they have been wronged in some way. They might be thinking that they need to seek some sort of revenge for some sort of action against them. And so because school is home away from home, and there are so many people there in the school environment for them, it is highly likely that if they have these fixations, if they have these worries, it's going to be against somebody who is in that school environment. So just putting them out of school does not negate the risk that they might find their way back to school. For example, if they really wanted to carry out some sort of act of revenge or justice seeking. Having a process in place helps us to avoid overreaction or underreaction. Both of these are relatively common when we're working with kids. When we have these relationships with kids, it's very, very normal for our school teams to hear, you know, oh, Johnny he threatened to kill everybody in his classroom. But I know him. I've known him for 10 years now, and he's grown up with us. I know that he was just spouting off. He was just blowing off steam, and he would never actually hurt anybody. The opposite could also be true, and especially if we don't have a particularly strong relationship with a young person. And so having a process in place helps us to utilize evidence-based tools to really fully figure out, again, what's going on below the surface for this young person. What is the risk involved? What did they mean when they said what they said? It really helps to provide an increased sense of physical and psychological safety for our schools. News travels fast, right? And especially scary news travels very, very fast. And so when we can say that we have this process in place, we know the steps to take, it can just help everybody in the community to breathe a little bit easier. Parents can know, okay, our schools have, again, an evidence-based process in place that they are using to assess the risk involved here and to create safety for not only that student, and my student, but for the whole community. We utilize the Salem-Kaiser model. Is anybody familiar with the Salem-Kaiser model? Heard of this? So those of you who have been through the training are well familiar. So we utilize the Salem-Kaiser model because this is a model initially designed by a man by the name of John Van Driel, who is a school psychologist by training. He's from the Salem-Keizer region of Oregon. And back in kind of the late 90s, some of us might remember, we saw a real surge in school-based violence, unfortunately. This is when Columbine happened, for example. And so John, working in the school district, recognized the need for exactly what I was just talking about. We need a methodical way to really assess the risk. We all kind of, oftentimes we can kind of spot the kids who need some extra help and support, no matter what that looks like. But when there is a risk of violence or a risk of harm to other people involved, we really need a system to take a look at what is the risk involved and how do we help that young person get back onto a better and safer path. So he worked with his community team to create the Salem-Keizer model. And so we'll take a look at what this looks like. But really the key piece of this is that it is team-based. John recognized the need, and this is something that we as threat assessment program managers continue to discuss, is that anytime that there is a concern of violence from a young person, and that includes whether it's violence against self or violence against others, that information should never, ever, ever stop with just one person, whether that be their friend, who might oftentimes be the first person to know, or if it's an adult who also knows this young person. So there should always be more people who become aware of this and who know how to help. Ideally, people like law enforcement, your school administrators, people who can step in and help and support that young person. It is an evidence-based model at this point, and it's used very, very widely throughout Washington State and Oregon. And we work closely actually with John. He is still doing this work. He's no longer doing the work of a school psychologist, but he's 100% committed to the work of promoting student threat assessments and reducing school violence. So the Salem-Keizer model really is a two-tiered process, and I should say it's sometimes a two-tiered process. So what this really looks like is at the first mention or the first knowledge that a young person has either made a threat or has acted out some sort of a threatening behavior, has brought a weapon to school. Really, it's up to that school team to decide, how do we move forward? There's some concern here around this behavior, around these statements that were made. And so, do we need to move forward with a threat assessment? When the answer to that is yes, then we'll move into what is referred to as a level 1 threat assessment. At that point, that is the investigation piece. We have protocols and interview templates that we utilize. So part of that process, what that looks like is that the school team, so that will be either the school administrator, it will be a team of the school administrator, the school counselor, sometimes the school psychologist, kind of depending on whether that young person has special education services. They will talk with the parents, they'll talk with the student. They'll utilize these interviews and these questionnaires that we have as part of the process to really dig into, what's going on? How are you feeling right now? What, do you understand why, we're concerned about this statement or this behavior? What's going on at home? What do we need to know to really better help you as a student, and potentially you as a family as well. So the level 1 process is all about that, again, looking at below the surface, figuring out, all of the data that we need to really figure out what's going on with this young person. At the end of the level 1 meeting, at the end of level 1 assessment, excuse me, what that team needs to ultimately decide is, do we feel like this student's behavior was reactive in nature? And what I mean by that is that those of us who know kids, we know that when young people are overwhelmed, oftentimes they're either going to externalize their behavior, they're going to, act out. So they're going to either, maybe have verbal outbursts in the classroom. They're going to be, maybe throwing chairs or knocking over desks and tables, externalizing their behavior. But it's reactive in nature. It's not necessarily that they are thinking of carrying out some sort of an act of targeted violence, right? Or are we looking at potentially targeted violence? Are we looking at the potential that a young person might be thinking about putting into place a plan to enact this need for revenge or this interest in revenge? So at the end of that level one, that's ultimately the decision of the team. And so if they decide, yes, we think that this might be reactive in nature. And so maybe this young person needs some additional safety measures put in place, things like additional supervision, maybe they're not allowed to bring their backpacks to school. Maybe we need to make some revisions to their transportation or to their school day. What is going to help them to not have to feel this level of overwhelm, this level of outburst? However, sometimes that level one team feels like, you know what, we really can't say that. We don't feel confident enough just for us to say that this young person is not actually planning, or that their behavior is not escalating to a point of potential serious violence. And so at that point, they can ask for that school team can ask for a level 2 assessment. And at that point, they call me. And so a big part of my job is to work with schools who have already conducted a level 1 threat assessment and who need some extra support. At that level 2 point, what I do is I ask for all of that documentation that was collected as part of the level 1 process. And then I create a confidential report, and I share it with a trained team of community members who are specifically from law enforcement. We work with, in Stonewall County, we work with Stonewall County Sheriff's Department. So law enforcement, mental health, PCYF or CPS, and juvenile court. And so the reason that we work with these folks is that they have access to a plethora of information that oftentimes we as educators don't have access to. And so they can come to the table with the school team. We'll sit down, we'll talk about this family, about this young person, and now we have some additional perspective and expertise at the table to really make these decisions around what comes next for this young person. Any questions around that?
Can I ask about the numbers?
Sure.
There's 68 in
Yeah.
21, 22, and my question has to do with, since our training with you, our principal said, can we meet once a month to just sort of talk, debrief, review, stay fresh? And so since then, we've had one level 1, and talk of perhaps of another. But then I look at this number, and how many students are in this region? I mean, have to be close to 100,000, I would think, or 80,000.
Yes, I'm trying to think. It's about, it's very high.
Yeah, and so I'm just wondering if that number seems low to me based on just.
I very much appreciate that. That number, so where 68 came from is that we send out monthly, I send out a request for data around threat assessment. So as I mentioned, I am not always a part of that level 1 process. So schools will submit that data to me. And I will say, I think this is coming from about 13 out of 35 of our school districts. So out of 13 school districts, that was 68 threat assessments throughout the year. So thank you so much. That's an excellent point. Yeah, absolutely. The 43 level 2 assessments is a little more accurate, only because I facilitate those. So, we were expecting across the state, we're expecting a lower number of these this year, but this fall is not turning out that way, unfortunately. So I think young people are still acclimated to being back in school full time, and families are still struggling. Okay. So I wanted to share this, and I've already kind of discussed, some of, when a young person has thoughts of committing an act of violence, they have a reason, they have a why, right? And so I like to show this picture because as a big part of our threat assessment process, we need to instill safety. We need to figure out what comes next for this young person. What are those safety measures that we can put in place? And so when we know that a young person is thinking about potentially carrying out some sort of act of violence against their school or the community, it's because of a coming together of 4 key elements. And so we have what I would refer to as the aggressor, the young person with that reasoning. We have their reasoning. We have those past stressors or that grievance, their why for wanting to carry out an act of violence. We have a potential target, and we know that sometimes that's not going to be a specific named individual. Sometimes it might just be a group of individuals. Sometimes it might just be, as many people as they can, potentially harm for whatever their reasoning is. and we have their opportunity, and that opportunity includes the environment that they will carry out this act. It includes their access to weapons or to firearms and whatever those means are to carry out this act. When all 4 of those elements come together, we have what's referred to as the danger zone. And so as part of that safety planning process, at the end of these threat assessments, what we want to do is pull apart these elements. We want to create space. And so what that might look like is, how do we separate the potential aggressor from the potential targets? That might look like at school. It might look like, a change in schedules for the students. It might look like different walking plans. It might look like, a different learning environment for one of the students, potentially. We also want to create space between the aggressor and the opportunity. And so again, that's, between the environment itself, but we also, of course, want to make sure that that student does not have access to weapons or to firearms. And oftentimes that can be a very difficult conversation with parents, as you can. But we say that the longest and most impactful change that we can make for that young person is to create space between the aggressor and those past stressors or that grievance. Because for them, again, that is their why. And so oftentimes this is going to occur through either mental health counseling or through positive relationship with a trusted adult. So if they feel like somebody can really hear them, can hear their heart, and can validate some of these feelings that they're having, but help them get the help that they need so that they don't have to feel those feelings, we are giving them the most long-term and impactful chance to not have to carry out some of those feelings that they're having and experiencing. Any thoughts or questions?
I have a quick question that kind of, this got me thinking about the previous slide too. So 68 level 1 assessments in 13 districts. There's a few different ways to look at this too, just the efficacy. How many, if you have this number off the top of your head, how many actual harmful events or attempted harmful events happened across those 13 districts when during that 68 assessments were being completed? And then I guess one level deeper too is, did any of those events occur from the 68 individuals that were assessed?
That is a really good question. And there are a couple of different ways of answering it. So as directly as possible, I don't have the number of actual events, only because those events look very different, right, across students. And so oftentimes a threat assessment will kind of come up because a school team sees an escalation in behavior. Oftentimes it'll, or it might be, that a student just makes an offhanded remark that, you can imagine. So it's not 68 specific events that a young person brought up at school.
Right.
So it's really, this process is all about assessing what is going on for this young person that culminated in whatever the comment was made or whatever the behavior that was carried out, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But I also really appreciate that question, because we have 68 here, and I don't know if anyone kind of sees this and thinks, I appreciate that you kind of went to, that seems very, very low. Sometimes people might see this and think like, oh my gosh, what's going on in our region? And when I speak of our region, I'm speaking of the 5 Northwest counties in Washington state. What's going on in our region, that we had 68 threat assessments happen and 43 level 2 threat assessments, which some folks think of as a little bit more severe. I think of this as 68 opportunities where we really had an opportunity to put into place an intervention and some supports for a young person who needed it. That is the ultimate goal of these threat assessments, that we figure out, again, what's feeling so bad that you have to, do this or act this way. And so how do we help support you better?
And then the 43, it's not possible to just jump straight into a level 2, right?
Correct.
So the 43 are, so basically 60% of the students that went through any assessment ended in a level 2 assessment.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah. So we also kind of look at the level 1 as this is the conversation that happens for the people who know and wrap around the student the most, right? That school team. And so oftentimes, or in using these numbers, 25 times, that school team said, you know what, we really feel like this was more reactive in nature. We really feel like we can put some measures into place for this young person. We don't feel like we need to involve, again, law enforcement. Mental health.
Okay, thank you.
I have questions. I'm just saving them to the end. These guys know I'm a thinker, so I'm taking it in, but I've
No,
been
that's
writing
perfect. And
down.
I really, I appreciate that too, because I'm much better at conversational questions. Throwing information at you. And I think honestly.
Oh, well, that's the end. Well, then there you go. Did you guys have any additional questions?
No, Peter actually asked what I was gonna ask, so go.
Okay, so I heard you say, talk about firearms in schools and things like that. Obviously, that's one of the more egregious and also one of the ones that we see in the media more often. So I guess some of the questions I have is maybe advice, policy and procedurally, maybe, I guess. So if it's see something, say something, like speak up, right? So we have students that are hearing from other students. When they go, like, is the student going to go to the administrator? Are they going to, like, how does, if it comes from a friend of the aggressor, how does the admin know this is the time that I should, or what is the guidance that should be given around, yes, this triggers the threat assessment versus this triggers a conversation like with a parent in my, or a phone call to a parent, but doesn't rise to the level of assemble a team. And if we're assembling a team, is there, I met with Representative Berg about this a little bit, just because she was interested to share some information with us. And so she gave me some information, but then she used some vocabulary that's a little bit different. So I've been trying to connect some dots.
Absolutely.
So help me understand when it rises to the level of assemble the team, have a conversation. Is it just bring a gun to school, or is there like bullying of a single student, or it's not a risk to the entire school, but it's a significant risk to a student or two.
Right, absolutely. Really good question. Thank you. So I think always it needs to start with a conversation. We always need to have a conversation with that student and with those parents at any time that there's a concern of a risk of violence or harm. I mean, I sometimes I kind of struggle with overusing the word violence because it doesn't always rise to the level of violence in the way that we think of it, right? And so it doesn't always have to rise to the level of a young person bringing a firearm to school, for example. It might be that we are seeing a pattern of escalating behavior, a pattern of escalating bullying, a pattern of escalating outbursts in the classroom, a student who maybe, any sort of major change in behavior that we're seeing that really is concerning to us, especially if we have that relationship with that young person. I think that, all of the work that we do with kids has to start with relationship building. And so when we recognize that a young person is struggling, and we can sort of look at them through that lens of, I know this kid and I just like, this is not them. Or I can just tell that there's something going on with them. This is just a way of gathering some more of that information to really find out, are they on that dangerous path? Or are they kind of going internal for some other reason,
So when I think about like the intersection of the Venn diagram you had up there of intersection of aggressor and target and opportunity, and I can't remember what the other one was, maybe previous grievances, I think. Oh shoot, now I forgot. Anyway, when I think about that, I think about sometimes like we'll have a student who just has a beef with another student, right? Or two, maybe they have a history, maybe I can't even imagine what the thing is. So it's not an escalation, but it's not stopping either, right? So when do we know to gather the entire team versus we're calling that same parent again and again? I'm just trying to decide. What I'm trying to decide is what's that trigger of when you bring in the whole team versus the admin is expected by the ESD, by the state law, by whatever. Right. What's that tipping point where is it like if we know it's illegal? Like if the police would consider it be illegal, then it must do this threat assessment, or is it just
It's,
like you get a gut feeling, like it's based on a gut feeling, so there's no it's a law, but I'm trying to figure out when the district complies with the law and when we're not, otherwise we could do these threat assessments.
all day, every day.
Kind of.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to ensure that the district is compliant with the law, and I can't understand what the trigger is to get us to that tipping point.
First and foremost, there is a ton of gray area, and that is the uncomfortable piece of threat assessments. But I would say, anytime there is the potential for somebody, whether it is another student or a staff member, to be severely harmed.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I think I get the question quite often when I give these trainings, just around like, hey, I've got a kid who like will not stop picking fights with other kids. Is that a threat assessment? And my response to that is, well, how severe did the fights get? Are they bringing pocket knives to the fight, or is it always just kind of does it start off verbally and then kind of ends with maybe somebody getting punched, which I do not mean to say is okay. But how risky are these behaviors?
Mhm.
And so if somebody has the potential for being really severely harmed, it would be a good idea, to look deeper and see what's going on.
And I did notice that if it's 13, that's 13 districts that are self-reporting out of 30, right? So you've got some people that are more compliant, they could be in a small district, so. I'm with you, and what Peter was saying, severe underreporting, I think is probably what's going on there, but anyway. Let's see, what was my other question? Sorry, I brought the wrong glasses. So I guess, the other question was after and I don't know the law, this is just a law question again. How long do we have to assemble the threat assessment team? Like once the administrator becomes aware of something or somebody says something to a staff member, is there a time frame attached to when we're required to be compliant to the assembling of a team?
Yeah, there's no written time requirement,
Okay.
but of course we want to do,
Quickly is the answer,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
As long as it's not like you have X number of hours, the
Right.
clock starts
Yes.
now, right?
No, exactly. I will say the only exception to that is if a student has special education services and if they are being excluded from school because of their behavior. Of course, we want to remain within that time period. So we have, I think it's typically about 10 days
Mhm.
per young person. Yeah.
Okay. I think those were just my questions, just trying to understand the law.
I so appreciate that. And again, the gray area is incredibly frustrating in this because it's such important work. It's so important that we do know the process and the steps to take. And so that gray area is really hard, but student behavior is gray area, and there are so many different reasons for why a young person or for any person feels the way that they do or acts the way they do.
Any other questions?
Before Aaron goes,
Can you guys hear me?
yes.
So kind of going off what Tina asked. So I just want to kind of re-ask in a different way, maybe with a hypothetical. So if you have one boy who threatens like, hey, I'm going to kick your butt.
Mhm.
Do we then have to convene a team or do we just kind of case by case basis that?
Yeah, if it's a threat of if it's a threat of like a fight, for example, you would not necessarily have to assemble a team. However, I will say that if your administrator feels like, this behavior really is escalating, it's really starting to get out of hand. We're having this conversation week after week after week. And now, my school counselor is concerned, their teachers are concerned. That might be a time to consider, should we go through this process?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was going to say before Aaron goes, Aaron is one of our speakers at one of the 4 parent forums we have. So in February, she's presenting on student mental health. And
Right.
so we're looking forward to you coming back and presenting on that evening. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I forgot to neglected to mention, I am a licensed mental health counselor by training. And so that's also the lens that I bring to this work. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to that as well. So thank you so much for having me. And again, thank you for the work that you all do for our kids and our community. And yeah, I just really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, 2B, board comments.
Yeah, I can kick it off. So one thing I did want to bring up, and I appreciate the threat assessment presentation. And we were going a lot into the gray area, which actually that's just one thing that I wanted to address in my comments. Specifically, right, the school is not the only place, right? We're talking about the school district, in these meetings and what we can do, but the school is not the only place that can nor should be addressing the issue of discrimination and bullying. And discrimination and bullying is what I'm talking about, is more of the gray area, right? Because it sounds, it's one of those things, the threat assessment seems like, you'll know it when you see it, or you'll know it when you hear it, right? A death threat, something along those lines. Whereas what I'm talking about more so are the constant aggressions that are often, there's an unconscious acceptance that I feel. I've spoken with several members in the community and just gotten more feedback. And it's clear that we need to do a much better job of anti-discrimination, not just not being discriminatory. And for those that are unclear with the difference, there's what I call passive, or there's active, passive, active. And so there's active discrimination, there's passive non-discrimination, and then there's active anti-discrimination. And many people in the community, will probably view themselves as, non-discriminatory. However, the issue there is being silent when these issues are occurring does make you complicit. It makes it seem like the actions, the words that are being said are okay. And so I just wanted to bring this up and to just challenge, anybody that's within the community, anybody that's here that does view themselves as non-discriminatory, to push themselves further to be anti-discriminatory, right? If there is something that is said that you would, this is my rule of thumb, if there's something that is being said that you would not want published in the Wall Street Journal with your name next to it, speak up against it and make sure that other people don't have those words published with their name next to it. We have so many, right? Our kids are sponges. And if we laugh at something, they laugh at something. If we make something accepted, they accept it. And so that's just where we need to challenge ourselves too, as parents, just to really take the anti-discrimination that goes across race, nationality, sexual orientation, what classes you're in school, anything, right? It's making sure that we're making this a place for people to not feel ashamed for who they are. And if something is being said that, once again, you would not want your name published next to, that you speak up against it. You don't just be quiet and say, well, at least that's not my name being published next to that. So that's my piece for my comments this week. I had a good precursor to it. So that's it.
I don't have a lot to say today. I wanted to congratulate Director Butler on earning his master's degree. So congratulations, Robert. And also I'm sad that you're not here, because I was gonna kind of flip you a little crap, because Liberty's playing BYU on Saturday. So I just wanted to say go Flames.
Director Butler, do you have
I don't like BYU, so go Liberty. So I'm fine with that. My comments, some things I want to say. First off, I had a great opportunity to coach the middle school cross-country team yesterday at their final meet. There was some illness amongst the coaching staff, so I got to ride the bus with them. And we got a great group of kids who worked really hard, did a great job. So I want to just publicly congratulate them on their meet yesterday. We had one of our athletes, Rio, who placed fourth, which is really awesome. But he ran like 1.8 miles in 11.5 minutes, which is nuts. the other comment I wanted to make is, yes, I'm on my way right now to my graduation for my master's. I want to thank the school district. Really, when I got on the board, I was inspired to further my education. So that credit really goes to the school district as well. And then I guess that's really all I have. Sorry I couldn't be there, but I'm glad I could be here, at least via Zoom.
Thank you, Robert. So, my comments, actually, I was going to congratulate Robert on his master's. I told Carly right before the meeting, that's where you were. Dang it, you beat me to it. So congratulations to all of us, really. Well done, sir. It's kind of lonely without either you or Carl sitting here, though. The other, sorry, go ahead.
Just real quick, something about the masters. So you know when we have graduation at high school, we get the robes with the weird sleeves. I found out those are actually master's robes.
Yes, yeah.
I didn't know that until I got my robes. I'm like, hey, I got the weird sleeves. So we have to have those. Those are actually master's robes. So fun fact, you kind of figure out what those robes are.
That's right. Now you can hold your cell phone and a bottle of water in there.
Exactly.
The other thing I wanted to say is I appreciate the emphasis we've had on communication and continuing to have even better communication with our families and the community and the parents. And I noticed, I heard, oh, actually, I have to also mention to Melanie. So when I went to the CTE meeting last week, I was talking to the culinary students who prepared our catering for that meeting, which was phenomenal. They did a fantastic job. They were very professional and the food was delicious. But I mentioned to them about having them possibly cater a school board meeting and assured them that both the board and the cabinet would be very interested in their catering. And I said, well, let me schedule that with Melanie. And they said, you know Melanie Freeman? Is she real? Which is funny to me because my kids said the same thing. You know Melanie Freeman from the district office? So the high school students are, I said,
I need to visit their class.
I know. I said, she's Trinity's mom. And they go, oh. So anyway, you're a rock star still. You still maintain rock star status at the high school. And more students now know that Melanie Freeman from the district office is real. Yes. Anyway, that's a side note. I did want to recognize the students that prepared the catering from the culinary one, mostly culinary two. There's one student from culinary one there and they did a phenomenal job. And I wanted to recognize that I got the communication about the special education parent meeting that came. I got a voicemail about that and some other stuff. And then also Dave Bianchini sent not one, but two emails today about the upcoming parent conferences and encourage the parents to go to those. It's not the same as in elementary school where you set up a time with the teachers. It's they sit at an open forum and you come and meet with them. So it's a little bit of adjustment if it's your first time having a student in middle school, but it does work well. The lines are manageable and has worked well for several years. So just wanted to put a plug in for that November. Help me out because the second one, first and second, November 1st and 2nd. So yeah. So I have that. Ava, did you have anything?
No,
Not today. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all. So next. No, you're next. No. Yes, Beth is next. Sorry. I have to admit, I wore the wrong glasses again this time. Yes. Next is the student services report prepared by Beth Mills.
I'm Beth Mills, Director of Student Services, and special education is definitely the biggest of the hats that I wear. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. Prepared some data, both historical and comparative, and then just talk a little bit about our successes and challenges.
Yeah, there's arrows on that.
Right. So this is our October count for special education and then the district. So October 1 for the last several years, and you can see that as the district grows, special education number also continues to grow. The dip last year was not that we didn't have a larger number of special education students. That is directly tied to the way that we count special education students. If you're not aware, all students are counted when they're enrolled and attending school. In order to count a student on our special education count, which is how we get our funding, we have to have current compliant paperwork that shows that they're eligible to receive the services. Last year, I held the issue with not being fully staffed with in-person, actually we didn't have any in-person school psychologists. So the fact that we had all virtual school psychologists, that was an issue last year that impacted our ability to have current compliant paperwork for all of our special education students on time. And that's going to happen a little bit later. This is an analysis of our special education staff over the last several years in terms of the number. I went ahead and kept this the way that this is a slide that I presented on last year, and I just updated what was in there. We do have a small reduction in the number of special education teachers. We have one teacher who had to go to part-time. But I think the number is a little misconstrued because I think I had some misunderstandings about someone who maybe was a full-time teacher, but I thought that that person was full-time special education, and actually that person was a split between general and special education. So that is more accurate in terms of our current number. Can see, however, that there's been a pretty significant increase in the number of paraeducator staff. Just put that out there. And then other staff, that means things like school psychologists, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physical therapists, behaviorist, speech language pathology assistants. So that all of those folks make up our special education staff. Some of our success and things to highlight is that we really have committed hardworking staff. I have worked in a number of districts, and the special education staff here, they like kids and they work really hard. I'll just say that. The excellent new hires that we're really excited about is that we have 2 in-person school psychologists, and trust me, after being without last year, we are loving it, and they're really great. They're both working their tails off to get everything done, get us caught up, get us compliant, and then also, you know, addressing the new needs that are coming up and cropping up this school year. We also have really involved families, which is nice to see. They come to IEP meetings. There's an interest in folks coming together and talking about special education from the families. And I would say for the most part, they're very understanding and lovely to work with. I have felt that in my last year or so here at Granite Wells. Some challenges. We do get an awful lot of requests for additional adult supports from the schools. And like right now, we don't necessarily have applicants for all of the positions currently. There are some roles that across the district that I'm responsible for, that it's been difficult to find candidates for some of our positions. When I say turnover in district leadership, I've been here, this is my second year. However, it's probably important to note that I am still the third director in 4 years. So that's something that's gonna take a while, really, to sort of, I think, put some continuity in place, in all kinds of things, systems and processes and all that kind of thing. We do have, inexperienced staff. We have some veterans, but we have actually quite a few, staff that are still only in their second or third year. Well, actually, one of our school psychologists is in her first year, but she's doing really great. And actually, some of those newer teachers are, I mean, we've got great veteran teachers as well, but some of those newer teachers are amazing. We have some great staff, even if they might be inexperienced. And kind of what was alluded to in the last presentation, we're still seeing the effects of COVID. In some of the behaviors that we're seeing students come to us with, and then some of the students that we've had a readiness to school issue, I think, historically, that we've been trying to address. That's, you know, why one of the reasons why early learning is one of our district goals and strategic plan. But COVID, when you think about all of the different experiences that the current kindergartners missed, just overall, that's for sure impacting our students, and just what she was referencing, just in terms of people still figuring out how to do school and how to get along with each other. Safety net is one of the ways that we are reimbursed for the high costs of special education. And you can see here the last several years what we have requested for our high needs students, and then the amount that we received. So for a couple of years there, we were getting about 86% of the amount that we requested. There was a little bit of a dip in 2021. And then last year we were back to about 86% of the requested amount. And I'm just estimating that our request this year, the amount that we're requesting, which I learned a lot from going through the process last year in terms of the reasons that we might not have been funded for certain students in certain parts of their program. And so I want our requested amount and our received amounts to be as close as possible. I want to, that's a goal of mine, is to have more than 86% of the requested amount be received. And right now I'm estimating that our request will be about 900,000 for the high needs students.
The requested amounts, I'm assuming those are hard costs that are incurred from this. What's the primary, if you could put your finger on it, what's the primary reason for, if these are costs the district is incurring because of these, or is the full amount not getting approved?
So one of the big things was I did not realize that because we had full day conferences on the schedule, that when we calculated the amount, even though we, you know, let's say we're talking about a teacher's salary, for example, because we do take their salary and divide it up amongst their caseload, and if we're submitting a student that's on their caseload, that's part of the request that we make. We submitted for 179 days because I knew that we had the one waiver day. But because we had several days that were non-student days, that portion was then recalculated based on 175 days instead of 179 days.
Okay.
So that was a big thing right there.
Okay.
But there's quite a few hoops, and they definitely go through with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that everything we're requesting is legit.
Okay, so it basically, and I'll put it in my own layman's terms, I guess, so that I can understand. The auditors went through and they said, oh, you don't need these people on for these many days technically, so we're just not going to give you the money for them by the letter of the grant.
So what we submit per high need student.
Mhm.
So let's say we're submitting a student who had a one-on-one paraeducator and also received services from an occupational therapist, physical therapist, a speech language pathologist, special education teacher, and a nurse.
Mhm.
We calculated all of those services as costs
Yep.
to the district based on 179 days.
Okay.
They recalculated all of those costs based on 175 days.
Gotcha. Okay.
Here's just a couple of data points that compare Granite Falls to the state. I know we've been looking at some Granite Falls data and some of it comparison. And I thought just a few of these things might be interesting for you to see. This is for special education. So our regular 4-year graduation rate from last year was 10% behind the state. That's the state special education. So higher education, the way we get that information is we contact what we call our leavers. So students that left us 1 year ago. So this spring and early fall, we've been contacting students that graduated in 2021 to find out what they're doing. And so we're looking to see if they're engaged. Are they employed? Are they accessing education? And 9.1% of our leavers from 2020 were engaged in any kind of higher education, as opposed to 16.7% at the state level. That's an increase though. The year before, we were at 3.3%. Because of our size, sometimes one class can really skew the data, but it just something to look at. The 35-day initial evaluation timeline, I put that there because it is a non-compliance issue, and we were pretty significantly impacted by the fact that we had the virtual school psychologists. So that was 5 initial evaluations that were not completed within the 35-day timeline. And the state wants us at 100%. So they're always going to say that we're not compliant. And I spent time in the last week training our school psychologists and our therapists on the timeline to follow, and our ESD director will be out on Friday to check and make sure that those were completed, and to check to do some dips and tests to see how we're doing to make sure that we're going to be meeting those timelines. And then the last comparative piece here is related to the least restrictive environment. And so each of our students on IEPs, we look at the number of minutes each day that they're spending in the general education setting and the special education setting. And 80 to 100%, we have about 51.3% of our students from this past year we're spending 80 to 100% of their time in the general education setting. 4 years ago, that would have looked the same at the state. So folks around the state there's been a huge push for increasing a students with special education needs in the general education setting. So just putting that out there so you could see and know that. And then I think this is my last slide. We're always being monitored by the state, whether they're actually coming and visiting us or targeting us in any way. Last year we had a fiscal audit that they did. It was a desk audit. They didn't actually come out and visit us. But we're always being monitored, and there's always different factors that they're looking at as terms of risk factors of whether they want to audit us again or they have a level of concern. And this is a few of our risk factors that you just might want to be aware of. They're concerned about special education enrollment being over 17%. We're currently at 19%. The other thing that you should probably know about that is, remember when I talked about how our monthly count has to do with our current compliant paperwork. That's how we're able to get that additional funding for special education students. The state actually, and this is based on legislation, actually caps our funding at 13.5%. So the gap between 13.5% and our percent, we are not receiving that funding. The other thing about the LRE is our students are also funded based on a tiered multiplier. And the amount that we receive for the 80 to 100%, I don't know what the actual difference is, but it's a greater amount than the other tiered
I don't remember the
students.
research.
But we report, that's how we report our count each month, is we break it out by the 2 tiers. We're currently disproportionate in the number of white students who are eligible under the disability category of emotional behavioral disability. So based on what you would expect, we have more of those students. They're concerned if your safety net award is over 600,000, ours was. And also if the safety net percentage is over 3% for the high cost students. Ours was 7%. So 7% of our students were submitted for high cost students. So they're just, they just might scratch their head and say, hey, what's going on there in terms of how we're using our funds. That's why our students are so costly. I
Really
think
quick.
that's my last slide, so I think if you guys have questions, I can flip back.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so on this one, you say the special education enrollment over 17% and the state caps that at 13.5.
Yeah, but the risk factor here, it sort of raises you up to a higher level of risk in terms of the monitoring system. Those were just some of the factors that they look at.
Well, and that's what I'm just wondering, like if they're capping at 13.5%, I mean, the school district, in my opinion, unless you can tell me differently, is reactive to the enrollment, right? And who is actually going to the school. So if they're capping at 13.5%, what suggestions do they have to get back down to 13.5% if they're not going to go beyond that? Because once again, the school district, in my opinion, is reactive. Whoever enrolls, we service.
Right. So the legislature are the deciders about the 13.5%. And in fact, from what I understand, part of Superintendent Reichdahl's request will be to raise that amount.
Okay.
But OSPI, in terms of their concern level, they're really wondering like what's going on there if you're over 17%.
Gotcha. Okay.
Questions?
I do, but Director Butler, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay. Do you have questions? I have a few. So can we go back to your first slide? Because I started to take notes and I'm not sure I got the numbers down right. Well, okay, not that slide. Sorry. Okay, actually, I guess it would be the next one, the one that had the staff count in it. So you mentioned okay, so we're at 17.9, so we're one less sped teacher or more, I guess, than we were in 2018, or 2 less than 2019, but we had half as many paras. Help me understand those numbers. Why do we have 50 paras? Like, why have we more than doubled our paras in the last 4 years? Just help me understand what would cause that kind of need.
Well, what I have seen is just the last 2 years. So from 30 to 45 and then 45 to 50. And most of the requests are based on students with challenging behaviors, students who are on IEPs with challenging behaviors. We do have students that have like physical disabilities who need that support or might have various, diagnoses that needs careful attention. But most of the requests that we have received and the IEP teams have decided needed additional adult support were around students with challenging behaviors.
Do you know what percentage of the 50? I'm curious, so the 50, are those FTE, like full-time employees? So we've slightly doubled, or in your time here, like we've gone from 30 to 50 for challenging behavior. And we're struggling, and I'm trying to say this in a nice way without being a jerk, but our fund balance is the lowest in around. So I'm not saying we don't service the students. I just am curious to understand that increase of 20 FTE while having less teachers, but keeping this about the same percentage of special education need in the district. So we're still right around 19%. That needle didn't move, but we've increased. What do you see as the path forward?
I think we did start some of these conversations last year, but I think that the goal would be for our students to be as independent as they possibly can. And so that the staff that are working with our students learn to hand over some of that responsibility to the student to be able to learn how to manage their behavior. And to not have as many adults, especially in some of the buildings.
I mean, I think I know where you're coming from, Tina, is that if jumped up by 15, another 5, like, is there as I'm curious too, it'd be nice to see a comparative, because if we have 420 students that fall under the realm of special education, is that ratio similar to other districts in the area?
Yeah, I could dig into this data a little bit more and then maybe send it out.
Yeah, because my only thought is we'll either see, because with the other slide showing that there's a growing percentage of students that are spending 80 to 100% of their time with other classes, or in the general population, I think was the term, or something along those lines, that I could then see if they're dispersed across classes, there being a need for more paras. I just want to know if, like, are we doing that similar to other schools that are doing it successfully? Do we have way more staff? Do we have less? And then that can help guide us to make sure that then the students are having the best.
So do we have a statement of direction on what your path forward is to? You're smiling. Like, I mean, I can look at Josh, but I'm looking at the director of special education. So do you have a statement of direction for the plan for 19%, 51% in general education versus the state, the state average, or the plan forward for 50 paras when we have less teachers and the same percentage of students, right?
Yeah.
Because I heard you say you would like to see the staff, or I think I heard you say you'd like to see the staff get the students to take more accountability for their actions. But that plan seems to me that we're asking the staff to intentionally work themselves out of a job, which I'm not certain that's a true statement of direction for the district, right? Because am I seeing this wrong? You guys are all looking at me, so
Well,
maybe I'm saying it.
I guess I'm just
but we're
wondering if I-
asking the para who is boots on the ground doing the work to work themselves out of a job. What's the incentive to do that?
Well, I guess I'm more wondering, so are you trying to figure out like, what's the 5-year plan? Like, are we stasis at 50? Are we going to 60? Are we coming back down to 40? Like, is the goal to get back down to 40? Like, is that what you're,
That's kind of what I want to
Okay.
know. I mean, I'm sitting here, what is the goal?
yeah,
Like, if 50 is the goal, then we hit our goal, but what is our goal? And where do we want, how do we plan to get there? Because if our plan at the top is to delegate it to the people that are boots on the ground, we're missing an opportunity. We're not leading.
Yeah.
The tail is wagging the dog.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, that's causing me to think that I need a plan. And the first thing that I think we need to make sure we're doing is whenever we do approve another staff, those are the one-on-ones, not just additional staffing that we're putting in the buildings that we expect a fade plan to be put in place by the certificated staff. But also working with the parents that they know, the goal is for you to work yourself out of a job. But like I said, also, we still have some open positions. So there always, at least as long as I've been here, there's always been a job.
Yeah, I'd like to see the statement of direction. Now I'm gonna change complete gears on that because I'm trying to think, but it's late in the day for me. So talk to me about the IEP paperwork and tell me about the bridge between special education and general education and how those IEP accommodations are connected. Because as I look at the number of students, the goal is at the state level, 64% to get into general education. So how do we build that bridge between the people that are used to working with IEPs and the teachers that maybe are not as familiar with IEPs? And wait, I'm going to tell you, I'm laying a trap because my son's on an IEP and he has 6 teachers. And maybe it's been communicated to the 6 teachers what his accommodations are. But I'm fairly confident it hasn't been communicated in a way that they understand what it is. So that's my concern, is not that maybe it's not getting communicated, maybe it's not getting communicated in a way that it's understood. But if we want to try to get our students to feel successful in general education, I feel like we have to wrap our arms around these teachers that are gen ed teachers so they understand what's expected of them to meet those needs, right? If we just send kids in that have several accommodations that it's outside their scope. So how do we build that bridge? What are we doing to build that bridge?
Well, one of the things that we're doing is we've provided professional development about universal design for learning. That means all learners. So how do I figure out all different kinds of learning abilities that are in my classroom, whether they're on an IEP or not? I can tell you that the expectation that the IEP at a glance be shared with all of the teachers is definitely an expectation. That's by the first day of school. We even gave staff time, I believe, and that extra day that we had before school started, that was one of the expectations, was that the special ed teachers and the gen ed teachers spends time talking about the students that are on IEPs. But we do also need more specific plans in terms of how to raise the needle on that 80 to 100%. One of the things that we're going to be doing is some teachers that have expressed an interest are going to do a book study on co-teaching. So looking at some different strategies with that needle above 51%.
Last thing was safety net, because I remember that we had a couple things. Marshall will tell me if they're audit findings or not, but they were some sort of finding of some sort of kind. That, or maybe it was just that our request was declined because there were some time sheeting issues and it happened a couple years in a row. Might have happened the year before you got here, or it might have crossed into your tenure. Help me out.
I think that we had audit findings around time and effort not being completed properly and not properly vetting contractors.
Oh, so I thought the time and the effort had to do with safety net.
No.
It doesn't?
That was
Okay.
just there.
Well, then you're off the hook on that one. I just want to make sure that, well, no, I thought that it had to do somehow with time sheeting and safe ambulance time sheeting. Anyway, I think we've resolved it. It's from a few years ago. I just wanted to make sure we're still resolved on it, that we haven't reverted.
So I want to make sure that I go away because I feel like I had some tasks to do.
There's the
So,
one big one, and actually this is for, I mean, I guess anybody that has a place, so I guess, Josh, and then as that rolls down to principals and stuff as well too, is just as long as the board has ratios and numbers to like look at for a plan, like, so, Beth, in your instance, if, I'm much more of I feel like in this instance, like a ratio is probably what we're looking for, right? Because obviously 50 para wouldn't be enough if we had 800 students in the special education program. But maybe it'd be way too many if we only had 100. So if there's some sort of guiding light of this is the goal, we want to get to, a 5-to-1 ratio of students to para, or a 10-to-1 ratio, or whatever that is. That's where we want to get to. Because we also have to keep in mind that our numbers are growing. They're growing every year. The percentage is going down a hair a little bit year over year, but our numbers are still growing overall. So if we have some sort of North Star that then we could come back to each time of, hey, last time you mentioned a 10-to-1 ratio. How is that tracking? What should change? Just so that we feel more educated than like looking up and being like, well, I guess it's right? Because it seems super easy to just be like, oh man, this program's having a real trouble. I guess let's hire more paras and hopefully that will help, when we're just throwing something against the wall and hoping that it sticks at that point. So that plan would be useful.
yes, so I will dig into the data and look at some of the surrounding districts. I don't know if they published that, but I am in regular communication with the directors, so I can probably get that. And then we'll come up with a plan for what our goal is. How we're gonna get there.
Yeah, exactly. A statement of direction. This is where we are and this is where we want to be. And this is our first plan of how we're going to get from here to there.
Yeah, similar to what we were talking about with Dr. Middleton about, standardized testing and everything is, how can we track getting up? Because like you said, a few years ago, the state would have been closer to where we are now, which is the 51% or so on. Obviously, they're doing things that are getting to that point. So
Yeah,
how can we bridge that?
Yeah, the thing I did mention is that there are quite a few districts in the state who have been part of these inclusionary practice projects. Some voluntary, some involuntary, and when you look at their data, you clearly see those districts and how they've made improvement across all of the different subcategories within special education.
Okay.
Thank
I have one thing, and
Yeah, please do.
that is with the referrals, I'm curious if more of them have been behavior-based and not just academic, which would lead to needing that additional support. I mean, I'm not looking for an answer tonight, but when you come back with the other things, I'd be curious to know that too.
Are you talking about the request for paraeducator staff or just the new
Just
referrals for special
In
education?
terms of referrals, are there more that are behavior-based, which would therefore lead to this increase in more paras? So,
they're identified as special education students.
right,
Because of that, and then, oh, hey, by the way, they also need paraeducators. I don't know how to quantify that. Like.
No, we can visit
historically.
more, but I wonder if there's a correlation there. That's all.
Right, thank you.
Hey, this is Director Butler. Can I ask you a series of questions real quick? I have a concern. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So I'm looking at the number, and I'm also concerned about FTE and payroll stuff, and the cost involved. My only concern is, well, let me put it this way. I'm going to ask you a leading question, Beth. What does IEP stand for?
Oh, sorry, individualized education program.
So my only concern is, and this is like, I want to have that directive and see, what the goal is, but all these cases are individualized. They're one-on-one. So I mean, I'm concerned trying to apply a number or formula or a metric to an individual plan. I just want to make sure we don't lose services that kids need. So if through your study you find out, hey, we need 50 to meet the needs of these students, I'm okay with that. And my main thing is like through this plan that they were talking about, find out like what's the directive, what's the goal. I love that idea. I just want to remember that, hey, if the answer is 50 because it has to be 50, I'm okay with that because we are required to provide educational services. So I just want to voice my thought and opinion on that.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, Robert, on that point as well, they are individualized. If for instance, out of 420 students, 20 need, personal paras for themselves, we at least need like a ledger in place to track that. At least we're aware of.
Yeah. That's why I love to get direction. Like, let's look at the numbers, make sure. But if that's the answer, it's the answer. I accept that. But I want us to actually know that's the answer.
Yep.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Middleton with the superintendent report.
Okay, we'll get to the screen in just a minute. I just had a couple of comments. I, like the rest of you, wanted to congratulate Director Butler on his master's, but there's a second person who got their master's in the fall, and that's my son, Nate. And so I'm very happy for him. He serves in the Navy and appreciate all that he does. He's just a couple of years younger than Albert, and they're closer in age than either one are to me, but Robert or Director Butler jokingly called me dad once, which was not a funny joke at
I
all.
thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, but congratulate to both of them. I'm proud of both of them, especially proud for Nate and where that's going to take him. Let's see. I wanted to just share a little data tonight focused on iReady because we had that window, and that window is now closed for the fall assessment. And as we shared at the last meeting, every time the window closed, I wanted to come back. This is a very brief report. I'm going to have a deeper dive in that I'll send in Board Insight to you. But before I get to that, this is our attendance. And I know that's a little small, but basically, that line is, that threshold is 90%. And this is for the last 14 days, the percentage of our students who have been in attendance. And the low point has been 89.7, 89, but we've been right at that line all the way across the last 2 weeks. The red line is the percent absent. And then the yellow line is the at least one tardy during the day. And so that's a smaller percent. But I bring this up because we've talked the last couple of times about some of the things that we can control and to help with our assessments and student learning. But I came across this today, just, wondering how is our attendance? And it's at that 90%, but schools that are highly successful, they're at that 95 to 97%. And so to me, it's just revealed one more issue that we need to address to emphasize how important attendance is and how really we've asked our principals to revise their school improvement plans. I'm not going to ask them to do that again for the school improvement plan, but just as a school goal, we have to get after that. We need to get up to that 95 to 97% again.
Actually, just real quick question on this. How many children fit on a bus? And I mentioned that just because I think every day for the past 2 weeks, we've had at least one bus. And granted, I know that it's, so how many of those kids are making it to school? Because I figure each route, I think there's 2 main routes, right? One runs to the 2 elementary schools, and then the next route runs to the middle and the high school. If each bus carries 60 kids, that's 120 kids that are potentially not making it to school because of the bus.
Yeah.
I just thought.
Does that green line account for that as far as, because I know like our bus was canceled one day and they said that if we couldn't make it to school as an excused absence, does that include excused?
It's
Absent?
still an absence. So even
Okay,
if the football team is going to
Yeah.
Whidbey Island at the end of the day, part of that day is going to be counted as absence. So absence is absence
Okay.
in this line. Our Mr. Gessman, who's been working on this data dashboard, we did correspond today, and he said he's going to ask about sort of digging a little bit deeper to see if we could, because if it is school related, then, but the point is we're still below where we want to be. And so that's something we want to look at. So this is all pretty small, and I apologize for that. I'm not going to go into the real details. What I want to do is give an overview and then share some things with you. But here are 4 columns, and this represents kindergarten. And if you remember here when we went to Mountain Way, and we could say the same about Monte Cristo, how excited they were, because this is the assessment of kindergartners last fall. And so that green or that yellow really represents the percentage below grade level. And this is the first time they're taking iReady. This is the first time some have even been on a Chromebook. So we expect some lower scores in kindergarten, except during the pandemic when all of a sudden everyone was doing very well. But then we got to the second assessment, so the winter one, and we're seeing some nice growth in that. And the yellow is decreasing. And then this is when I think we were at Monte Cristo or at Mountain Way, and we were sharing the iReady results. Just a lot of nice growth, and so pretty excited. So what that represents is the percentage of kindergartners who have successfully mastered the kindergarten standards. So then we come to fall. They are now in first grade, and so kindergarten, of course, is being measured on kindergarten standards. Now we're to first grade standards. Now, I don't want to give the impression that it's a pre-test and a post-test. This is a level test based on September or October of their first grade year. So where they should be at. And so, of course, when Dr. Manns and I met with our 2 elementary principals the other day, saying, what's going on here? And why does that not translate a little bit? So certainly there's some summer loss. We also talked about, okay, how is that positive assessment environment? We have an admin team, PLC, professional learning community team meeting tomorrow, where we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this, because I could go up all the grade levels and they're all sort of indicating that. And so we just have to have a real deep conversation. So let's just skip to 5th grade. And it's a similar pattern. And we have a larger, lower amount, but you can see some increases from the fall to the spring. And then when we get to the fall one for this one, those 4th graders are now 5th graders. We're seeing kids who are 1 year, 2 year, multiple years behind. And really our conversations with the principals, with the elementary principals the other day, and what it'll be tomorrow is we're really at a crisis level. I mean, these are really high numbers of not performing at this time of year for that grade level. And so we're going to be talking about what are we going to do differently immediately so that to ensure that we're doing the standards and reaching all students, and again, protecting academic learning time. So I'll have more information for you, but this is sort of the general theme across the different grade levels.
Is this the first full year that there's data collected in this series, or can we compare it?
It's tough to compare because the year before was that hybrid year.
Yeah.
And
I'm just curious because this represents in my eyes a full cycle, right? As I mentioned, I think in one of the June board meetings was like, please stay on top of it during the summer so we don't lose
That's
the
right.
progress that we
Yep.
had.
Yep.
It's some is expected, but I'm curious as we go year over year, because that's the unfortunate thing is you kind of have to see that full cycle. But like this, the kindergarten is alarming, but then this just makes me feel like the bottom portion of the kindergarten graph, if we extrapolate across, is just growing
right
across time. Because now we're some 22.8% are 3 or more grade levels
Yeah.
below.
Yeah.
And that's in 5th grade. So no, I guess I don't know what I'm thinking, what I'm asking, what I'm doing. It's just those are alarming.
And I wish our PLC was today, that I could report more on what we'll be discussing tomorrow within that group and with our coach. But we're to that point of we need to really look at our day, what we're doing, and just protecting that academic learning time and really focused on standards.
Do we share this with the parents? Like, do we send their students 4-year metric or 4 test metrics?
I know we can with MAP. I'm sure we can with iReady. I don't know if I haven't seen that report. But
Because I think that I bet I would be surprised to see the likely, based on this, loss of growth, right? I mean, I think I would be surprised, and I think our parents are our best partners and if you're talking to me, biggest nag to get stuff done at home, because so maybe we should send it home to the parents too.
Do we have any data from like other districts who take the same tests as far as if they're seeing the same kind of dips and growth?
I could ask other districts for it in just conversation. And this goes back to last spring and before we had that 3rd assessment. So we were just talking about the first 2. I had said, I'm really concerned because we're not seeing the growth. And I did share this with the 2 principals the other day. I've been at a couple of superintendent meetings. And one of the meetings was, okay, tell us how your year's going, what's going well, and so forth. And so the majority stood up and said, you know what, we're back. Our kids are doing great. They're thriving. And when it was my turn, I said, I'm seeing glimmers of hope, but I'm not where all of you are. I've had some deeper conversations with Lakewood because they have SBA scores very close to ours. And they're really doing the same things as we are. We're focused on professional learning communities. We're getting to the standards. looking at learning targets and that sort of thing. But the other districts, as I said, they feel like, yeah, we're just thriving. And we saw that in the SBA scores when we looked at all the other districts. So again, just a continued conversation and looking for action steps of, but I don't want to be histrionic here, but I mean, to me, we're at a crisis level and we've got to be looking at something differently.
That's actually what I was getting, this is actually just like, maybe this is the question that a lot of people are thinking, but not asking. I mean, for lack of a better term, what's next? How do we actually, the 45% of students that are 2 or more grade levels below in 5th grade? I mean, I'm not trying to sound harsh and saying, you know, the holding back or anything, but what good are we doing sending them to 6th grade if they're already 2 to 3 grade levels back in 5th grade?
Right.
And then we keep propagating, like, is there, you know, because if I understand the drive to have teachers bring them up, but if that's not working, what are we doing?
Right. And so retention rarely works. I'd say 1% of the time it works because the dropout statistics are so great if you do retain. So it is a matter of continuing, and it is a matter of continuing that class, that grade levels standards, instructing to everybody that grade level standards. But elsewhere during the day, this is where I think we're headed tomorrow in our PLC. We're doing breakout groups, and we might be doing what's called walk to read or walk to math. And now you are, breaking kids up. Those who need more remedial work, that's where they're focused on. They've gotten that 5th grade instruction, but they're also going to get some 2nd or 3rd grade instruction. Those who are that top, they might be at the 7th grade level. So during that intervention time, okay, let's continue to push them.
A rookie question, but could these numbers be leading us to sped numbers that are 19%?
I think it's another factor.
I mean,
Yeah.
if we wonder, I don't know what type of classification. So like when I saw 50, like Peter was saying, it's a number. If it's our goal, then it's right. I don't know if it is, but if this is leading to our 19% sped, then that's an indicator. I don't know the answer, but could it? It sounds like maybe.
I'll get a breakout of all the grades and so forth to you.
Yeah.
The other thing I just wanted to share was at the last board meeting, I'd indicated that Chief Dalton was going to go visit, and sure enough, the next 2 days he visited all the schools, and all the outside doors were good. Once he got inside, though, he found doors that were some doors that were either open or that needed repair, and so that's been so noted, and principals are having those conversations, and we'll be on top of the repairs that are needed. So again, just a thank you to Chief Dalton for really partnering with us this year and making that a top priority.
So the doors that need repair are not like exterior exit doors. Like they're doors, like
There are a couple that there's some air pressure issues that we're dealing with, but the other ones are inside ones.
okay,
Some,
air pressure is inconvenient,
So-
but not a massive. Yeah,
yes.
gotcha. Cool.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Robert, do you have any questions for Dr. Middleton?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, board reports, my goodness. WIAA.
Yeah, nothing extremely specific aside from the fact that as a lifelong Washingtonian, I never thought I'd be hoping for rain so much. We went to the pumpkin patch and it was 80 degrees.
And
And it was a
Dusty.
dust bowl.
Yeah.
It was wild. No, I I'm sure anybody that plays sports anywhere across here right now is getting frustrated with canceled practices, canceled meets, stuff moving indoors, all that stuff. So that's just me, is everybody keep your eyes on the weather and hope that that rain finally comes. Also for the safety of the forest fires too. I mean, there was one, the Jim Creek one or whatever that just popped up. Somebody in my neighborhood mentioned that it was 8 miles away. And I was like, oh, okay, it's close. And then they put it in terms of feet. They're like, oh, it's a hair over 40,000 feet away. And I'm like, that's way more terrifying than 8 miles. So please rain come. So that's my announcement.
Community report.
All right, I have got a few things. In the last couple of weeks, we had our first parental advisory council meeting. It went really well. We had a few people. We're hoping for more people next time, but it was really interesting to hear everything that those parents had to say. It was really great to be able to talk to them. And so I think it was a really big success and hope that we get more people next time. And then some information from the Community Coalition. They want everyone to know that on this Saturday, there is a food drive at IGA. And so they are seeking food and money donations, and they want you to know that all funds and donations received by the Granite Falls Community Coalition stay in Granite Falls. And they also want you to know that on the 29th of October is National Drug Take Back Day at PharmaSave from 10 to 2 p.m. So you can bring all of your old drugs there, I guess, and throw them away. And then the Chamber of Commerce would like you to know that they have a meeting tomorrow from 6 to 8 p.m. and they're really looking for people to come and participate and join and do all that kind of stuff. Just some other things I want to touch on. There's so many things going on in the next couple weeks in our district and across all the schools. One thing I wanted to point out that's really cool is the middle school has a ton of after-school clubs going on right now, and they're really amazing. They have a choir club, digital art club, snack and paint club, the robotics club, and a roller skating club, and all those things are going on after school, and information's in their office. And I almost wish I could go back to middle school. I mean, I don't. I hated middle school, but it just sounds like so much fun. Also, the IGA is having a pumpkin painting they want everyone to know about on Saturday, the 29th for kiddos, and it's like glow in the dark paint and stuff. And then, of course, we have our Frightening Falls here in town. That's going to be amazing as always. And for all of the people who are new here in Granite who haven't been, Frightening Falls is a ton of fun. So please come. The Mountain Way Booster Club is having their trunk or treat this Friday in the middle school parking lot. And the Eagles are having their trunk or treat on the afternoon of the 28th. So that's just a few of the things going on, but all kinds of ways to be involved with communities.
I add to Director Kincaid's community report, and that is Carol Panegas and the coalition had some unexpended grant funds, and so they donated $11,000 for student incentives. And so the principal has access to whether it's rewarding attendance, as we were talking about, or improvement or something like that. So I want to thank Carol and her team for that.
Yeah, that's really
Thank you.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
So this is a community event coming up the 28th, next Friday. A group of us in the community like to tailgate at the football games. And I know Josh is a part of that community likes to do that. And we're having our chili cook-off, right, Josh?
What are you?
What's your ask?
Chili cook-off?
Oh, chili cook-off.
3.0.
The community tailgating.
awesome.
What time does that start?
What time, Robert?
Can you hear me?
Yes, what time?
So we usually just talk about 5:30, because game starts at 7, we want to be in there by 6:30, so 5:30, Josh, that sound right? I just want to reiterate, this is a community event, not a school event. This is just people in the community get together before the game to tailgating.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you.
And the chamber meeting, where and when was that?
It is tomorrow, 20th, from 6 to 8 PM, and I believe it's just over at City Hall.
Okay, thank you.
All right, items from the floor. Assuming we have nobody signed up. All right. No unfinished business, new business. First reading to amend policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business and quorum. Discussion.
Yeah, let me open it up really quick.
Madam Chair, if I could just give an overview of these 5
Please do.
policies or laws are recommended either updates or new additions.
This is, appreciate that. And this is the one that I think this is the one that I've been asking for, to give Melanie her Friday night back policy. Is that what this one is? That's in the subtext, right?
Yeah.
But it talks about we no longer have to have this agenda published by Friday evening. Right? We now say that, I mean, back in the day when we had to print it off and make photocopies and staple it and hand it out, Friday made sense. But in today's day and age with board docs, it makes sense to me that we make this amendment.
Yeah.
Any other discussion?
Mm-mm.
Director Butler, I'll assume you'll just jump in if you have something to say.
That is correct.
Okay, all right.
All right, well, then if no other discussion, I'd like to make a motion that we accept policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business and quorum, first reading, but pass to a second reading.
The motion has been made
I second.
and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. First reading to amend policy 1410, executive or closed sessions. Any discussion? It's just adding letter H, and that's mostly to do with legal counsel representing district matters.
And then defining executive or closed session.
Exactly. I think I can make the motion, so I'll make a motion that we accept the first reading to amend policy 1410, executive or closed sessions.
I'll second.
Made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Perfect. First reading to amend policy 1420, proposed agenda and consent agenda. This one is new, like brand new.
Okay, I was gonna say, because I didn't see any red line, so.
Yeah. It's also noted on the agenda, new, so it's a couple paragraphs, just procedural.
Discussion here.
All right, if there's no discussion, again, Director Butler, you just let me know, then I'll make a motion that we accept or that we approve the first reading or accept the first reading to amend policy 1420, proposed agenda and consent agenda.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, first reading to amend policy 3122, excused and unexcused absences. Apparently I didn't open that one ahead of time. Thought I had them all open. I tried to be really prepared, but I must have missed that one. All right, any discussion? We're talking about the definition of absence, which is sort of.
Mental health stuff.
Mhm. Do you have do you have any insight to add?
No, I think we
Okay,
need to do this.
yeah.
Yeah.
Our
Mhm,
last few years.
exactly. All right.
Yeah,
If there's no discussion,
yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve policy 3122 for excused and unexcused absences.
I'll second it.
all right. Thanks, Robert. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, final one is the new policy, first reading to adopt Policy 6112, rental or lease of district real property. Discussion.
Rental or lease, I'm just trying to see, was there any, okay, wait, circulation, 45 days. I was gonna say, is there any temporal definition on this? So like a rental or a lease, time frame of, 10, like, because we were talking about the field, I think too, was something that came to mind when I saw this, was when the field's updated, renting out the field for potential events or anything. I guess I'm just,
I don't see any concerns with this
okay,
policy.
okay. I know, no more discussion.
All right. I noticed that we don't exactly define real property. I know the law defines it, so I'm not super worried about that, but anyway.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve policy 6112, rental or lease of district real property.
The motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Right. Any discussion on the consent agenda?
No.
Was there addition to the personnel report or was it just added later?
There's additions down at the bottom.
Yeah, additions. Consent.
Hold on,
There
let me
is-
turn the page.
It's not a.
I
3,
think it's online.
Yeah.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah.
All right, let me look.
just 3 person.
Oh, gotcha. There it is. So. Let me look at it. Oh, I did look at it. Oh. All right, I already knew that. Okay, so I guess we make a motion to accept the consent agenda with the additions. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Right. And we are done.